Hello everyone, this is Essen and we are here to learn Python programming. So in this lecture we will learn about basic syntax of Python programming. So in basic syntax we have different things like indentation. Indentation is actually the four empty spaces in Python used to delimit the blocks. Because there are blocks, there are always blocks in different programming languages like some compound statements such as if, while, uh, def, class, any loop, any function, any class, any code of class will be shown in a separate block of code. So that's why other programming languages use different curly braces to show a separate block of code in your script. But in Python we use indentation, four empty spaces from left, to delimit the block from the other rest of the code. So indentation is used in Python to delimit blocks, and the number of spaces may be variable, but at all statement within the same block must be indented with the same amount. So that's why these all statements look different from the other rest of the code. So other things, we have the header line of compound statements such as if, while, def, and class should be terminated with a colon. So colon we use at the end of each compound statement that actually shows, that actually understand by the compiler that a separate block is going to start. So that's why compiler understand after the colons, there will always be needed an indentation. So next thing, we have semicolons, which is optional at the end of each statement, but in C++ and Java we need semicolon compulsory at the end of the statement. But in Python we do not need such semicolons at the end of the statement. Next, we are printing to the screen. um, Printing to the screen is very easy because in Python we do not need to include header files or any other things to pre-execute before executing any statement. So we can simply write print statement on your code, and the statement containing any sentence will be shown on your screen after execution. So printing is very easy in Python. Reading keyboard inputs. If we need some input values from users, so we can use simple a keyword input. So input statement is very easy in Python as well, and in but it vary in different versions. In 2.7 version of Python we can use raw input, but in latest version we can simply use input keyword to take the input from user. Similarly, we can comment any line. We can comment a single line by using the hash keyword, and we can also comment a block of multiple lines or block of code simply by using three consecutive quotes. And next, if we develop or create a new file of Python script, that file must have extension of .py. So these are the simple uh, basic syntax statements we have in Python, but we will learn in practically one by one in our compiler as well. So let's see a few examples related to our topic. Here we go. uh, Here first we have to learn about the uh, softwares, which software we must use for Python programming. um, if you are using Linux operating system or Macintosh, you do not need to install interpreter or compiler for Python, because compiler in those operating system, compiler for Python is actually part of the operating system. So you do not need to install separately. But if you are using Windows, in Windows you need to install compiler for Python separately. So you can you can do Python programming in Windows um, by using different softwares. For example, I'm using Spider, and I I download and install Python XY, and I must recommend that if you are using Windows operating system, you must download Python XY, because Python XY by default containing Spider and other softwares and hundreds of libraries of Python built in. So this is a Python XY software. Here we can code, and on the right side of pan we can see the output of our code. So let's start with a simple print statement. We want to print something, and it could be something. So simply you can run this line of code, and it will execute and show the result here. So something will be print on the screen because we are using just print statement. So here like C++, we do not need to include anything, include any library, etc. So just we need to write a print statement, and it executes very well. Secondly, indentation. Let understand indentation. For example, we have an if statement. If something true, then colons actually show you that the indentation will be start from the very next line. So it automatically take indentation because it knows that we are programming in Python. So if it doesn't take any indentation, then we have to use at least 4 empty spaces to run our code. So here um, we can we can print any value. Like we execute this code, and yes, it prints any value or value very well. So if we can use another print statement like some other values, so it will also execute very well. So if we can see our result here, we can print any value to the screen. But here I want to tell you, if we use indentation wrongly, I backspace this line of code, and then I save the code and executing this, so it will show you indentation error. So what is telling you, um, so unindent does not match any outer indentation level. So there is always a level of indentation. If we do not use proper indentation, now it's again on its proper place. So if we execute this code, it will execute without any error. So indentation is very important. So this compound statement, which is if statement, why this is a compound statement? Because it contain a block of code, and this block of code may have multiple lines of code, multiple line of scripts. So that's why it is called compound statement. So indentation is actually showing you that this is a separate block. If we want to execute something, some other things, uh, we can easily run out of this block and print and make any statement out of this block. Like this. So this print statement is actually out of this block, and it will execute and print after this. I hope you understand this concept of indentation. What does it mean? It means that this print statement is not part of the if compound statement. This is not part of this body. So this body is totally different. It is execute only if the value is true, right? If the value is not true, then this part of the code will never execute. So this was just a simple example of indentation. After that, now we will learn how to take a value from the user. For example, name is a variable, and we can put into variable any value, because we do not need to explicitly define the data type of this variable, because in all other programming language we have to define that the data type of the variables. But in Python is actually implicitly compiler decide and define the data type of the variables. Programmers do not need to define it explicitly. So this is a variable, it may contain any value. So we can print name any value. So just printing, if I put a name here like John, so it will print definitely John clearly here. So we can also clear this screen as well. This is a simple clear command to clear this screen. So what is the output? It is simply showing us the output of the value of this name variable. But if we want to take the same value from a user during the execution of a code, then we will definitely use the name of the variable and then raw input, which is a built-in function to take the input from the user. So here we can any value of their name, any name entered by the user will be saved into this variable. So we can print this name as well. For example, I execute this, John will be as it is print on the screen, because it is already saved. And this line, when execute this line, processor when execute this line, it will require a value from the user. So I'm entering a console, entering a value in the console, then this value which I'm entering will be saved in this variable, and it will also be print on the screen. So I enter another name, and yes, this is shown here because we are again printing the value of the variable. So this is the simply how to deal with the basic simple syntax of the Python. And in variables we can just put a name of the variable like val, a variable that can contain some value in it. So that's it. We do not need to define the data type of this variable. So if we want to print this val, we can easily print it out. We do not need this code. So if we execute this, yes, after John, it will print on the screen 1223, which is an integer value. So this is a simple, very simple and easy to learn Python programming. Here, if we want to limit the input from the user, for example, we can not only see the value in name variable, but we can see the type, which type of value name actually containing. For example, if we execute this code, it will take a value from user. My name is Khan. When I enter, so it print the name what the user entered. So it print the name on the screen, which is Khan. So in next line, it is actually telling us what type of variable we are using. So implicitly compiler assign string class to name variable. I hope this is clear. This all concept in Python is known as dynamically defined data types. So data types dynamically defined in Python. So if we want to learn, if we want to have, for example, if we want to have an integer value from user, so let's execute the same code. We are not here entering the same string, we are entering an integer here. So when we give this value, this integer is actually converted into string. So what does it mean? Raw input or input function taking the value by default into string and it converting into a string. So the number is also converted into a string. But if we want to limit the input, so we are limiting input into just integer. So in this case, a user can only enter an integer value. If user enter a string, the system definitely show you an error. For example, we can change the name of the variable because we are going to get an integer value. So execute this code, enter your name, enter your name, and now if we again put our name, which is a string, but we limit our code to take only integer values, so what will happen? Definitely it will show us an invalid literal error for int Khan, because Khan is not an in, Khan belongs to a string. So in this case, because we limit our code, we limit the input which is only in integer form, so a compiler can only get an integer value. We again execute the code, we get another value which is integer, so it executes successfully. So 2323 is an integer and it is shown here on the screen, and we can easily find out that this object is actually belong to integer class. So I hope so all these basic concepts we have understand very well. And in the last, Python files have extension .py. Yes, if you want to comment, you can easily comment a file by using comment a line by using hash. And yes, this is a file which I created with the name of .py extension. So I hope you understand today's lecture, and if you have any question, you can write down in the comment section. In next lecture, we will learn about Python variables, how Python variables created, how they use, how they store, how they use as a container of data. So how they store actually data. So wherever we can use different variables in functions, out of the functions, in classes, with objects, how they interact with some other building blocks as well. So thank you so much everyone.